Hi guys, I'm Kristen. This is Kristen is Fully Booked. Welcome to those of you who are new here for the first time, and welcome back to those of you who have been to my channel before. Today, I am going to be talking about House of Sky and Breath, the second Crescent City book. I'm going to do a little non-spoiler review at the beginning and a big spoilery discussion of all of my thoughts and reactions to the second book in the series after that. So I'll just start off by saying that it is raining, it is dark, it is dreary out, my lighting is all over the place. I apologize for that today. I finished House of Sky and Breath last night. I have kind of been reeling. I cannot stop thinking about what happened at the ending. I have been back and forth on whether or not to do a spoilery reactions only video or a non-spoiler review and wait and do spoilery thoughts later, but honestly I just need to talk about this book. So what I'm going to do is some brief non-spoilery thoughts, non-spoilery review sort of at the beginning of this video. And then if you have finished the book already and you want to hear my thoughts and reactions and I guess predictions or reeling in of how I am feeling about what just happened, stick around for the second half of the video. If you haven't read the book yet or haven't finished it yet, stop when I tell you, when I finish the non-spoilery thoughts, and then come back later to watch the rest of the video to react with me once you have finished the book. So I'll start off by saying that I think that this book was a lot more messy and a little bit more chaotic than the first book. I actually think that the first book was the best thing that I've read by Sarah J. Maas. It's probably my favorite thing that I've read by her up to this point. I really liked the world. I really liked the buddy cop murder mystery that we were getting with Bryce and Hunt. And I actually really liked the world building and the urban setting that we were getting in that book. And while there were other things going on outside of that murder mystery, the plot in House of Earth and Blood made sense to me and it flowed pretty smoothly, I thought, with some deep emotional dives and some world building and some world history and conspiracy stuff and all of that stuff on top of the murder mystery. Now in House of Sky and Breath, we do have sort of like a problem that they are working on. In this one, it deals with a missing person. We start off the book with an extremely long prologue with a totally different person in POV that we've never met before that is related to the rebellion that is in Pangaea, I think is what it's called, like the other continent. And pretty early on in the book, our main group, Bryce and Hunt, get drawn into this missing person situation involving the rebellion. I will say that I think that I didn't really buy into how Bryce and Hunt and the other characters here get sucked into this event. It involves this one character who is supposed to be a member of like an intelligence agency sharing a bunch of information with Bryce and Hunt and others in order to try to get some small piece of information from them, so for his case. And it did not make sense to me that he would share all of this information with these people, however much he trusts them. And he actually didn't even get the information that he needed from Bryce. So I'll say that the buy-in here for this missing person's plot did not make sense to me. Even though I understood their motivations, their decision-making throughout the entire book made absolutely no sense. Now in this book, outside of this missing persons thing and all of the possible other storylines that are happening created by the other POVs that we're getting, there is also a really big focus on the world and the world history in this book. And definitely we are following down that path of the like revisionist type history story, which was definitely hinted at in the first book, especially with the character of Jezebel and the library and the gallery and some other things that were happening towards the end of the book. That is definitely where we are going, outside of like the small kind of framework structure of the missing person. We're focusing a lot more on the world history, on the Asteri, and on the rebellion in this book. We do get new POVs in this book, so I don't think this is super spoilery, but we do get Therion's point of view. That is the mermaid that was introduced to readers in the first book. And we also get Ithan's POV, who was the shifter, the younger brother of Connor from the first book. Now with these other POVs, it was really clear that Sarah J. Maas was trying to expand out the world and the possible or potential storylines here. And unfortunately, it really felt like that. While Ithan and Therion were very involved with the plot of what was happening with all of the others, like they were all wrapped up in it together, it just started to make it feel like it was clear that we were starting to introduce different possible problems or storylines in those two figures' roles as well, on top of the other storylines that we're getting with Rune and Bryce and Hunt, despite having one thing that united them or a couple things that united them, because there were so many other storylines starting to go. It felt really chaotic, running back and forth all over the place with all of those different perspectives and possible storylines. It just felt like she was trying to expand it a little bit too broad, a little bit too quickly. I don't think that this was mentioned in the synopsis, but I will say that Danica and Danica's secrets are at play again here in this book. And that actually made me feel really bad for Bryce. It turns out there are still a lot more secrets that Danica had, and we continue to learn more about them. And that's definitely a huge, huge motivator for Bryce and for a lot of the kind of crazy things that she does, because she just can't seem to get over the fact that Danica was not telling her everything that was happening in her life, despite the fact that Danica knew pretty much everything about Bryce. On one hand, I like that Sarah J. Maas has created this character who we saw very, very briefly in person in the first book, but who plays such a huge role in this series despite the fact that they aren't around any longer. But ultimately in this book, I just felt really bad for Bryce every time more and more things came out. One final critique that I have here before I switch into more of the positive things. I am aware that I started off with the negatives, but anyway, one more thing that I didn't like as much as I did in the first book was that the city itself, like Crescent City or Lunathion, was very much less of a thing in and of itself. In the first book, the vibe of the city, all of the different neighborhoods, the interplay between all of the different like species of beings here was so prevalent. Like I felt like Lunathion was such a clear, bright, interesting place. And part of that could have been because it was new and exciting and different and we were like just learning and getting to see it. But it felt like the city itself was like almost a character in and of itself in that first book. But in this book, while they are still in Crescent City for 95% of the book, it felt like the unique descriptive features of the city were so much less present. Or just like you couldn't feel like the pulse of the city in the same way that you could in the first book. I don't know, let me know if you agree with that, or if you think it was just simply because it was a new, exciting place in the first book. But I really don't feel like the city was as interesting or as prevalent of like a place in this book compared to how it was in the first book. Okay, let's get into some of the positive things that I think that this book did really well. I always think and say that Sarah J. Maas writes really amazing characters and really great relationships, whether those are platonic or romantic. And that absolutely continues to be the case here. Whether it is the brother-sister dynamic, whether it is a platonic plus question mark relationship, whether it is a growing or an established romantic relationship, I thought that they were all really interesting. There is one specific dynamic that I'm going to get into in my spoilery thoughts that didn't work as well for me, or that I thought was just Sarah J. Maas playing with us a little bit. But generally, I think all of the relationships were very interesting. We are definitely starting to see some more expanding or possible coupling up outside of our original relationship that we focused on in the first book in a very Throne of Glass-esque kind of way. I do see so many comparisons between Crescent City and Throne of Glass, like from a character perspective, from a plot, from a world perspective, so many comparisons that I think that you can make. It feels very similar to the feeling of Throne and Glass in a lot of different ways. And actually, if you want to see a video of me pairing up all of the characters in this book that are so clearly characters in Throne of Glass, let me know. I have actually started to create that list. There's also a very distinct found family vibe in this book with sort of, let's say, like the new crew. I think we got pieces of that. You definitely knew or were introduced to all of the people that are going to be making up this like new found family crew, but it really solidifies as like a new group. Whereas before they were all kind of segregated and separated based on their different species, what ox pack that they were in or whatever. Whereas in this book, it is like a really fun found family group. The only thing that I'll say is that Bryce is pretty much the only girl in this found family group. And then just to finish out my non-spoilery thoughts here, I do like that in this series, Sarah J. Maas seems to be doing a lot of kind of like nodding to the fans or little on the nose comments. In the first book, that was really present in like the alpha hole thing, and that felt like a very direct little nod to the fans and the past kind of male leads from her other series. It definitely felt like she was including us in on a joke. There were a lot more of those ones of some very self-aware comments throughout this book, which I thought they're kind of cute. They do take me out of it a little bit. The one thing that I will say that I didn't like, that it felt like she was making a clear choice specifically because of fan questions, was this whole are Bryce and Hunt endgame. And I felt like what she did with that in this book was very deliberately playing with our emotions because she knows that we are wondering that. And I just don't like the way that she handled it in this book because it felt like the writing choices that she was making were just to keep us strung along wondering. It didn't feel like those were real plot or character choices. It felt like they were choices by Sarah J. Maas. Like you could see her hand at work there trying to lead us on and keep us wondering. Okay, that is where I will leave it for my non-spoilery thoughts. Overall, I guess I enjoyed it, but the chaotic messiness of the plot did really bother me throughout. And because the characters kept making choices that didn't make sense for them or just didn't make sense, period, I definitely like the first book more than this book. I am extremely curious to see where this will go. That ending, I don't know. If you're stopping here and you haven't read it yet, come back. When you finish this book, I need to talk about more. I need to talk about that ending. So I will leave you there for the non-spoilery thoughts. Definitely make sure to save this video and come back when you have finished reading the book so you can hear and respond to my reactions. Okay, so if you are still here, that means that you have finished reading House of Sky and Breath and you want to know what I think about it, or you just want to hear other people reeling and reacting in the same way that I was when I finished this book last night and immediately had to leave my bedroom in order to search through Instagram and YouTube to try to find other people reacting to that ending. Fortunately, unfortunately, people are being very good about not doing any spoilers, like putting out any spoilery content other than like before the book was even released. I heard that there was a spoiler. Thank you everyone to the fan base. Like it's so great that we're all trying to be really non-spoilery, even to like react or give impressions of what we think about the book so as to not ruin other people's reading experience. But at the same time, I need to talk to other people about that ending. What the F? Okay, but I will save the obvious discussion about the ending and the implications of that and my questions about what that means for this series and the other series for later. I'll save that for the end and we'll talk about my other spots. So obviously you can tell if you watch the first part of this video with my non-spoilery thoughts, I did not like this book as much as the first book and I had a lot of critiques about it. And I'll start off by saying, what even was the point of Cormac? What role did he actually play? Was he necessary, or could what he provided in this book have been done in a different way? I feel like Cormac was used or only would show up when it was sort of relevant. And I know that that's like, well, obviously, but here's what I mean by that. I think that he was used at the very beginning of the book with that appearance as a way to make us unsure about whether or not Bryce and Hunt were endgame. Here's a shiny new fae, and guess what? Bryce's little star lights up when she sees him. It was used solely in order to make us unsure of Bryce and Hunt, especially at this time when they're like, oh, we haven't slept together yet because we just want to like see how we both feel. We want to get to know each other more. Whatever. Then it looked like it was going to be this fake dating thing, which I actually thought could have been very interesting. I feel like everyone loves to see fake dating, even if they weren't endgame. Like still, even if you're rooting for Hunt and Bryce, as I was, it would have been more interesting to see the dynamic of Cormac and Bryce like being together in public and pretending to continue to be betrothed. As they said in the plot, this is what we're going to do. And that's not what they did at all. Even when, let me put my tea down because I'm getting handsy here. They even have this agreement that they're going to pretend to be dating in public or pretend to be betrothed, and like she's not very obviously with Hunt, and they do absolutely nothing to keep that facade going. Like nothing at all. The role that Cormac played in this book was make us feel unsure about Bryce and Hunt endgame, and as an introduction or an into the rebellion. And that was it. That was all he did. He basically disappeared from the book in the middle 65-80% of the book. He is not around at all, other than to instigate some rebellion stuff that's going on. But really, he was the introduction between Hunt and Day, which I'll talk about, and he was to make us worried about, did I say Hunt and Day? Rune and Day, and to make us worried about Hunt and Bryce. I feel bad for Cormac because he played no other role in this book. I will briefly say now, because I sort of brought it up, but I don't think that the Bryce and Hunt having not slept together yet thing was believable. We needed to see the first time on paper, and it didn't happen in the last book. And that's the only reason that they had not slept together up until this point. And I will say that I feel like the sexual tension and the angst between Bryce and Hunt was ruined by my constant worry that was created, I think, intentionally by Sarah J. Maas throughout the book, that something bad was going to happen. Because once they kind of got to the point where, like, okay, you know what? I'm tired of waiting. Let's do this. We're in it. We're together. We're a team. I actually liked all of that, like, we're a team, whatever, them having discussions about what they meant to each other, what words or terms, how they wanted to use with each other. I thought that the communication between Bryce and Hunt was actually very good, even when they do have that fight and they're both clearly upset about how the other respond. Then they come back, they're still upset, but they have like a very healthy, productive discussion about how they felt, and that was not what I was expecting, and I absolutely loved it. But because their first time kept getting put off, and not in like a sexual angst or like sexual tension, like make me, ooh, when's it gonna happen kind of a way, it kept getting put off of being like, oh well tonight, and I'm like, something's gonna happen. Hunt is gonna die, so they're gonna be separated, somebody's gonna get kidnapped. Like every time that it was that they made a plan to have their first time, I didn't actually think that it was gonna happen. I was convinced each time that something terrible was going to happen. Say what you will about like, well, that means she's doing her job. It didn't feel natural to the story. It made me feel like it was a choice that SJM was making to put that off. Okay, I alluded to the original buy-in not working for me in my non-spoilery thoughts. So I don't believe that Tharian, as the like head of intelligence for the Under Queen or whatever she is called, in order to get one piece of information about how Danica possibly knew this, what was her name? Sophie? Anyway, knew this girl, that he would, in exchange for that, explain all of the thing about the rebellion and this missing girl and the emails between Danica and this girl. He did not owe Bryce that information in exchange for the nothing that she gave him. I think at this point, he's saying it in front of like Hunt and Bryce and maybe even Ethan and Rune. Like so many people immediately get brought into this situation. In order for the whole rest of the book from a plot perspective to make sense of how they all got dragged into this, you have to believe that initial scene with Tharian sharing all of that information with all of those people, and I don't buy that that realistically would have happened. Just a couple other spoilery things before we get into like the ending. But I felt really bad for Bryce every time more information about Danica got brought up. I thought it was so upsetting that Danica was keeping so much from Bryce. And on one hand, you can understand why she was keeping the stuff about her suspicions on the Asteri and like the revisionist history, like all of that. You can understand why she wasn't including Bryce, because that's some serious stuff and she was trying to protect her, but not telling her that she had a mate, that she was going across the ocean or whatever every other month to see her mate for 2 years. She kept that from Bryce. Were you not so devastated for Bryce when that came out? But I am surprised that it took them that long to like really confront the Hellhound Baxian. Because I feel like it was really obvious, not that he was Danica's mate, but I felt like it was very obvious that he was on their side from almost the first scene we get from him. Another thing that didn't make sense to me was when Tharian goes to the River Daughter or whatever, his betrothed, and is like, hey, I don't want this to happen. And it's like a shock that she reacts the way that she does, and he has to suddenly run and like only has 30 minutes to somehow find a way out. This is someone that he's known and seen the way that she's responded to things for, what was it, 10 years? So I don't really know what he was expecting to get out of that conversation. I'm not upset that he had that conversation, but I'm upset that he didn't have a clear escape plan or a back out plan when that was obviously what was going to happen. Like, she was obviously going to get really upset and take it to her mom, and to take that extreme step with the Viper Queen didn't make sense to me. I don't understand why he did that in the timing that he did. And it just felt like we were creating a situation for a plot event that we needed to happen then for the next book. But I just felt like with both of the cases with Ethan and Therian, it was so clear and a little bit clunky in the way that these new plot lines were being introduced. Like, for example, the thing with the dragon and Flynn, there's obviously something is going to be going on there. And it just felt like she was trying to create new storylines for this expansion that's obviously happening, but I felt like it was all done in a really clunky way. And that because there were these like separate storylines or like seeds of storylines that were being created, it did make the plot and the pacing really chaotic. I do want to say with Rune and Daybright, or the Hind, or Lydia, whatever you want to call her, I mean, I think it was obvious that it was the Hind, like pretty early on. When Cormac was talking about Daybright, I was like, it's Fury. We're finally gonna get Fury, more details on her. And then it was clearly not Fury, especially when there was like sort of like starting to be vibes between Rune and Daybright. The only other person that it could have been was the Hind. I didn't believe that it was the Harpy. I thought for sure it was the Hind, especially because of the connection with Hypaxia, because he said, you sound sort of familiar, and she was like, no, you don't know me, we've never met. I think he said that in the very first time, and I immediately knew then that it was the Hind, because the Hind was Hypaxia's sister. That being said, I understand that it would take Rune a little bit of time to adjust to that idea when he does find out, although he definitely should have registered that whoever Daybright was, they were high enough up with the Asteri that they were going to have had or been responsible for some bad things. He should have known that. Anyone that is a double agent or that goes undercover is going to do things that are not ideal and that are questionable, and that is all for the sake of keeping the ruse going so that they can get access to the information that they're getting. So Rune should have known that whoever Daybright was, they were going to have done things that he was not okay with. Her screaming and like trying to like break through his walls, of like her just screaming his name over and over again, was maybe the saddest thing in the book that got me the most. I thought that was so cold for Rune, and all he needed to do, he did not have to adjust in that moment, he did not need to accept or whatever in that moment. All he needed to do was say, I need a minute, I need a little bit of time to adjust to this idea. That's it. That's all he had to say, was just like, I hear you, thank you for saving my life and my sister's life and Hunt's life and whatever, like, I hear you, I need a minute. That's all he had to say. Okay, let's get into it. The main event, let's be real. The only thing that we all really want to talk about is the ACOTAR connection. When she takes off the blindfold and she's in like this study or whatever, that's when I knew. And everyone else comes running in, and it became so clear at that point what was happening and who these characters were. A couple thoughts here is that I don't know how she jumped into that gate expecting to come into hell, because it wasn't a direct open gate to hell. I don't know if she thought that if she thought about going to hell, she would go to hell. I'm not sure. It definitely didn't make sense, because Rigulus had just told her that the scar was like a beacon to the original world. So it makes sense that she got pulled to that world. I wasn't clear when Regulus was doing his little villain monologue thing. That was another like little nod there from the last book, or from SJM to us, about Micah's villainous monologuing in the first book. But anyway, I did not immediately pick up when he was describing like the Fae original world and the Shifter Fae original world, but so clearly after the ending, when I read those back, it was so clearly talking about like the Prithian world in ACOTAR and the Fae world, I don't remember what it was called, in Throne of Glass. Which begs to question, Are we also going to get Throne of Glass crossover stuff here? I'm going to try to rein this in here. Let's talk implications. Do we think that all remaining books in both Crescent City and ACOTAR are now going to be crossover books? As far as I could tell from Goodreads, there's only one book still listed under, or at least pulled up on Crescent City, like Crescent City number 3 is pulled up on Goodreads. And then we have books 5 and 6 and an additional 3-point something novella for ACOTAR. I believe, I don't know where I got this from, but I believe I had heard that the next book that we were going to get from ACOTAR was going to be that additional novella. I think that it was hinted at it that it was Azrael's novella love story, in which case it's possible that that novella could take place pre-Bryce showing up in Prythian. My guess is that it's possible that the novella will be Bryce exclusive, but now I am genuinely concerned and worried that the remaining books 5 and 6 in ACOTAR and Crescent City number 3 are going to be crossover books. I feel like this could so easily become, at least book number 5 is Bryce like winning over the Night Court and all of the High Lords or whatever, like getting them involved, getting them on board with somehow figuring out, and also figuring out how to cross back into Midgard and take all of them, like take a possible army back. And then I would see Crescent City number 3 at least as being like the final showdown if there are only 3 books in Crescent City. I did not think that the world and history and problem, like all of what we were shaping up to with Crescent City, I did not believe that that could be concluded in only 3 books. I felt like we were getting a Throne of Glass size series and expansion. That's at least how it felt like it was shaping up to me. But now suddenly with Bryce showing up in Prythian or in the ACOTAR world, and we know that we have that many books still with them there, it made it suddenly seem a little bit more likely that there might actually only be one more Crescent City book. However, I don't know if that's enough time to solve like all of Ithan's and Tharian's problems and like all of the other stuff there. I'm not sure. I did feel like we were getting a huge expansion with this book. I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts? How do you feel about it? I personally feel a little bit upset, because I have been feeling very resolved with ACOTAR. I really didn't care about A Court of Silver Flames. At this point, I really just want to know who ends up with who. I have been kind of thinking lately that I might not even pick up the next ACOTAR books, and now obviously I feel like I have to. It's not like it wasn't clear that these were other worlds. We do have that scene in Throne of Glass in the end, in the last book, where, you know, Aelin is shooting through all of the different worlds and universes, and she sees Feyre and Rhys, and she sees Crescent City and while she's shooting through. So it's not like we didn't know that these were all worlds within all different universes, or like worlds within a universe, however you want to say that. It's not like we weren't aware of that. I just didn't need them to be tied up. And I'm going to be really annoyed if I'm being forced to read other books, or even if other readers are now like forced to read a series that they weren't planning to read in order to sync everything up. I feel like that's a little bit of an annoying choice on the author's part. Now, predictions here or thoughts on this connection. Does anyone else think that Amren must have been a Asteri? Like, I don't remember the specific wording, and I didn't have time to go back and check like how Rhys talked about Amren and how Amren talked about like how she arrived in the world. Like, I know that it had to do with like some other god, and she was like this like light being or whatever. And now I'm wondering, with the timing of what everything was saying, if she was an Asteri, like one of the Asteri from Bryce's world, if she was like not one of them, but if they said like relations of theirs or whatever had been kicked out of this other world where the Starborn came from. So was Amren an Asteri who sort of got stuck, or who decided to stay there? I mean, she's fully Fae now, we know, but is that who she was? I also somehow think that Fury is maybe Asteri? I'm not sure. I don't like that we don't know what Fury is yet. She's definitely from another world. Let's say that. Like the whole thing with Danica confronting her for smelling a certain way, like I think that Fury is from a different world. In a more recent way, let's say, than all of the other people in this world. I don't know. Let me know what you think. That is where I'm at. I think that this crossover thing is happening. I'm not thrilled about it. I am concerned about what this means for the remaining books to be published and how much crossover there is here. If you read this book, I mean, if you're all the way here, you read this book, let me know what you thought down below, please, just because this is like a non-spoiler / spoiler review. Put like spoilers and then hit enter a bunch of times in comments down below so that you don't spoil anything for people who are here for the non-spoiler review. I would really love to hear what other people thought of this book, what they thought specifically of the ending, and anything else that I mentioned here in my spoilery thoughts. I really feel like I need to talk to someone about what happened in this book. So hit me up in the comments down below. Hit me up through social media. You're welcome to check my socials down below in the description box. Put a star in the comments if you just want to let me know that you made it this far, and I will see you guys next time. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.